Before I proceed any further, let me acknowledge the 2-year anniversary of the horrific terrorist Hamas attack on the people of Israel on October 7th, 2023. More than 1,200 Israeli citizens and many American citizens were brutally murdered, and hundreds more were violently kidnapped and held captive in Gaza. Later on today, I'll meet with several hostages who thankfully were released, as well as the families of those whose loved ones were tragically killed in Gaza. 2 years later, it's incredibly important that every single hostage is returned and returned at the same time. It's important that we restore the ceasefire that Donald Trump inherited and that was broken in a matter of weeks during the Trump presidency. It's important that the devastation in Gaza end and that we surge humanitarian assistance into Gaza to provide relief to Palestinian civilians who for 2 years have been in harm's way in a theater of war through no fault of their own. And it's important that we find a just and lasting peace that can be implemented for the good of the people of Israel, our close ally, and for the good of the Palestinian people, so that we have Israel and the Palestinian people living side by side in peace, security, and prosperity. This is day 7 of the Trump shutdown of the federal government. And Democrats in the House and Democrats in the Senate continue to hold the line on behalf of the American people. Why? Because we're fighting to protect their health care in the midst of a crisis that has been inflicted upon them by Republicans from the very beginning of Donald Trump's presidency. Republicans have hurt everyday Americans in order to reward their billionaire donors. That's what the one big ugly bill was all about. Largest cut to Medicaid in American history. Stole food from the mouths of children, seniors, and hungry veterans in order to provide massive tax breaks, permanent in nature, to the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. Democrats have a very different approach to what we should be doing in order to make life better for the American people. And at this moment in time, that's addressing the Republican healthcare crisis that is devastating millions of people all across the country. And because of the Republicans' continued refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, tens of millions of Americans are about to experience dramatically increased premiums, copays, and deductibles that will bankrupt them or deprive them of the health care that they need for themselves, their children, and their families. That's completely and totally unacceptable. And the government remains shut down right now because of the refusal and unwillingness by Donald Trump and Republicans to actually provide health care to working class Americans. That's an unacceptable position. And that's why Democrats continue to fight this fight on behalf of the American people. Whether they live in a blue state, a purple state, or a red state, this fight that Democrats are waging is on behalf of all Americans. Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Leader. I just want to get your take on this memo that's circulating in the White House that seems to suggest that furloughed workers may not get back pay. What is your reaction to that guidance? And is it your expectation that some type of language to ensure back pay will be included in any final CR or bill once this shutdown is resolved?
Donald Trump and his administration have been torturing federal employees since the very beginning of his presidency, engaging in mass firings, harassing them, brutalizing them, laying people off without justification, and violating the law. So let me be clear to those hardworking federal employees who are now being victimized by this Trump Republican shutdown. We continue to stand with you, and we'll stand with you as we've done from the very beginning of this presidency. And the law is clear. Every single furloughed federal employee is entitled to back pay. Period. Full stop. The law is clear, and we will make sure that that law is followed.
Mr. Leader, good morning. Thank you. I've been to dozens of these press conferences with you where you've had a screenshot up here of something that Marjorie Taylor Greene has said, usually it's something outrageous. Today, you're saying that she's making your point. Is the enemy of my enemy my friend in this case?
What I'm saying is that Democrats have been crystal clear that this fight is about the health care of the American people. Marjorie Taylor Greene acknowledges this fight is about the health care of the American people. It's Republicans, in terms of the leadership, that is missing in action, that is currently on vacation, that has canceled votes, and that refuses to deal with the healthcare crisis that Republicans have created. The cost of living in America is far too high. The Trump tariffs are adding thousands of dollars of additional expenses to everyday Americans. Right now, rents out of control. Right now, housing prices out of control. Right now, electricity bills skyrocketing. Right now, grocery costs out of control. Right now. And because of the Republican refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, as Marjorie Taylor Greene herself has acknowledged, tens of millions of people are about to experience dramatically increased health insurance costs. How is that acceptable in the wealthiest country in the history of the world? It's not. And a growing number of Republicans clearly are adopting the enlightened Democratic position that this fight is about the health care of working class Americans, middle class Americans, and everyday Americans. Thanks. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Speaker Johnson spent some time in his statements this morning talking about New York and the impacts that'll see from the shutdown, saying that the state will lose $1.2 billion a month in GDP as the shutdown stretches on. Also, a recent CBS poll found majority of Americans are really concerned about the economic impacts of the shutdown. You say you speak with your constituents often. What are you hearing from them about the impacts that they're seeing? What's the attitude about the shutdown that they're having?
Democrats are really concerned about the Trump Republican shutdown and the fact that this is part of a pattern of continuing to devastate the American economy. The overwhelming majority of Americans right now, whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, or independent, collectively believe that the country is heading in the wrong direction. And the Republican shutdown is making things worse. Making things worse. Which is why we need to come to the table. We have repeatedly said, Leader Schumer, Senate Democrats, House Democrats have repeatedly said, we will sit down anytime, any place with anyone in the Trump administration or amongst congressional Republican leadership to reopen the government and to enact a spending agreement that actually makes life better for the American people. But it has to make life better for the American people, not for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. For everyday Americans, and it has to address the Republican healthcare crisis. Let me also make one other thing clear. This fight is not about what Speaker Johnson or Republicans want to make this Trump shutdown and this fight about. It's not about Chuck Schumer, and it's not about Hakeem Jeffries. It's about the American people. Democrats are fighting for you, the American people. working class Americans, everyday Americans, and middle class Americans. That's what this fight is all about. People who have been suffering under the extremism of Trump and Republican policies, hurting everyday Americans to reward their billionaire donors. And the American people have had enough of the extremism that has been unleashed on them by the Trump administration and their failures around the economy. Costs aren't going down, they're going up. And we can't allow tens of millions of Americans who are both on the Affordable Care Act, like many veterans, or who get their health insurance through their employers, to experience massive hikes to their healthcare premiums, copays, and deductibles. That's what this fight is all about. It's not about us. This fight is about you, the American people. You deserve better. Thanks. Back. Yep.
If rank and file Senate Democrats negotiate a deal that hasn't matched exactly what you described, would you provide the votes in the House to reopen the government?
Well, with respect to anything that emerges from the Senate, we'll have to evaluate it on its merits, and that's our intention. Leader Schumer and I are in regular contact. House Democrats and Senate Democrats are in regular contact with each other. And I'm thankful for the fact that Senate Democrats have continued to strongly and boldly hold the line. What is John Thune doing? What are they doing? What, 5 times they've brought this dead on arrival partisan Republican spending bill to the floor for a vote, and it's gone down 5 times. That's legislative insanity. Doing the same thing and expecting a different result. It's not happening. It's not happening because House Democrats and Senate Democrats are standing up for the health care of the American people. So to the extent that anything emerges in terms of bipartisan discussions amongst Senate Democrats and Senate Republicans with full visibility involving House Democrats, then we'll have to evaluate anything that's presented on the merits. But the line in the sand has been clear. It has to decisively address the Republican healthcare crisis. Paul?
Today marks 2 weeks since Congresswoman-elect Grijalva won her race by more than 40 points. 3 white men won special elections this year and were sworn in less than 24 hours after the polls closed in their races. What's going on?
It's a very good question, and Mike Johnson has to actually answer that question as to why Republicans have refused to seat Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva. Why? She won her election decisively. She should have been sworn in yesterday during the pro forma session, which had occurred in April when 2 Republicans won special elections in Florida. They dramatically underperformed, won by margins that were far less than Representative-elect Grijalva, but they were sworn in immediately. And you know why they were sworn in immediately? Because Republicans at the time were focused on jamming their one big ugly bill down the throats of the American people. So when it comes to enacting massive tax breaks for Republican billionaire donors, they race to swear people in, which is what they did in April with those 2 extreme MAGA Republicans in Florida. But when it comes to Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva, who will represent a majority Latino district in Arizona, who's a Democrat, who has made clear that she will be the 218th signature on the petition to force a vote on the release of the Epstein files. House Republicans can't be bothered. But this is consistent with a group of people that's on vacation right now. I mean, that is the most extraordinary thing. These people, the extremists, are on vacation right now. The government is shut down. A healthcare crisis is unfolding before the eyes of the American people because of the actions taken by the GOP. They're on vacation and they're unwilling to swear in Representative-elect Grijalva. We're going to make sure we do everything possible to ensure that she is sworn in sooner rather than later, including going back to the floor of the House during the next pro forma session to demand that she be seated. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Speaker Johnson said this morning that we were always planning to have those conversations in the month of October with regard to the Affordable Care Act premium tax credits. In your conversations and discussions leading up to the shutdown and since, were you ever given the impression that Republicans had intended to have this conversation in October? I see you smirking. I want to get your sense of.
Those are just my Brooklyn smile.
Maybe, but I want to.
So, I mean, really, this is what we're doing right now. Like Mike Johnson, this is an acknowledgement that the Democratic position is the American position, which is that this healthcare crisis has to be addressed right now. In that Oval Office meeting, Republicans had a very different position. That was just like a week ago. They had a very different position. They said, we have all the time in the world to address the Affordable Care Act tax credits. They don't expire until the end of the year. We have all the time in the world. Now, they're saying something very different, which is, yeah, we were planning to address. Okay, if you're planning to address it, let's do it right now. Welcome on board to the fact that the Republican healthcare crisis has to be addressed right now. Very different position than the one that they took in that Oval Office meeting. We have consistently pointed out that how is it the case that you bent over backwards to pass your one big ugly bill, rip healthcare from millions of Americans, steal food from the mouths of hungry children in order to reward your billionaire donors, and those tax breaks that were enacted in connection with the Republican one big ugly bill, they were made permanent and they expired on December 31st of this year. It was an unsustainable position, as Democrats have repeatedly pointed out, that Republicans raced to provide massive tax breaks for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected, setting the country on a path toward possible bankruptcy or financial ruin, skyrocketing the debt by more than $3 trillion, doing it on the backs of working class Americans, because there was apparently urgency to renew those massive tax breaks because they expired on December 31st of this year. And then at the same time, taking the position in the Oval Office meeting and publicly that we have all the time in the world to deal with the healthcare crisis that we've created and the Affordable Care Act tax credits that are expiring. Of course, that was an unsustainable position. And I'm thankful that Republicans are now acknowledging it. But they still have to actually sit down at the negotiating table so we can resolve the issue, consistent with what Marjorie Taylor Greene has said needs to be done. Address the cost of living crisis that Republicans have made worse in the United States of America.
Leader Jeffries, there is a bipartisan bill in the House that's been introduced to do a one-year extension of these ACA subsidies. Is that acceptable to you, and how would you vote if that came up?
A one-year extension of the Affordable Care Act tax credits is not acceptable. It's a non-starter. It's a non-starter. It was introduced by the same people who just permanently extended massive tax breaks for their billionaire donors. Think about that. And now what they're saying to working class Americans who we're standing up for, middle class Americans who we're standing up for, and everyday Americans who we're standing up for, whose tax credits are about to expire and they're getting ready to face dramatically increased premiums. And we're talking about veterans, we're talking about farmers, we're talking about ranchers, we're talking about everyday Americans. And they only get a 1-year extension? Like, what world are these MAGA extremists living in right now? To think that Democrats are going to go along with a 1-year extension from a group of people, meaning the Republicans, who just permanently extended massive tax breaks for their billionaire donors. It's a laughable proposition. It makes no sense. The Democratic position has been clear, permanent extension. And let's go from there in terms of a negotiation.
Yeah, Leader Jeffries, thank you. We talked about how President Trump said yesterday he's willing to work with Democrats and have the conversation about healthcare. You just said you and Leader Schumer would also be willing to do that. What's stopping Democratic leaders from picking up the phone or just requesting a meeting with the White House, even if Republican leaders here are not on board with that?
We demanded a meeting with the White House initially. The White House agreed to the meeting. Then Donald Trump backed out of the meeting. And then public pressure caused him to have the meeting again. And we're clear, subsequent to that, that the line of communication remains open on our end. And we look forward to sitting down with any high-level member of the administration, any serious member of the administration, including, of course, President, the Vice President, or others who they may designate at an appropriate time and place, if they're serious about actually getting resolution to the Republican healthcare crisis that they now acknowledge needs to be addressed. Let's address it on behalf of the American people. Let's reopen the government. Let's end the Trump shutdown. Let's actually enact a spending agreement that makes life better for the American people.
One of the things that's been floated is sort of capping the Obamacare program, not allowing new enrollees to have the subsidy or income limits. Are you open to any of those ideas?
I mean, let's be clear about one thing here again. The notion that a group of people who just jam these permanent tax breaks down the throats of the American people for their billionaire donors, suggesting that the Affordable Care Act tax credits should not be made available to small business entrepreneurs, to working families, middle-class Americans, and everyday Americans, is the irony of all ironies. And if that's their position, they can take a hike. I mean, 93% of the people currently, hear me, America, 93% of the people who benefit from the Affordable Care Act tax credits make $63,000 or less. These are working class Americans that Democrats are fighting to protect in terms of their health care. The Affordable Care Act tax credit extension is a battle for everyday Americans. And this is another example of Republicans throwing out baseless lies to try to defend their indefensible position, which is that they've assaulted the healthcare of the American people. Democrats are on the right side of that fight, and Republicans are certainly on the wrong side.
Thank you, Leader. Just to be a follow-up on that. So are you saying there's no reforms to the Affordable Care Act that are on the table at all for you?
What I'm saying is that we have an open mind as it relates to an extension of the Affordable Care Act tax credits based on the merits of what is presented in good faith. Republicans arguing that the Affordable Care Act tax credits are connected to a program that benefits wealthier Americans is ludicrous. MAGA Republican voters don't even believe it, because a majority of them MAGA Republican voters correctly want the Affordable Care Act tax credits extended. Last question.
Leader Jeffries, the president suggested yesterday that he may invoke the Insurrection Act to authorize the use of military force in American cities. Do you see any grounds for him to use that law for this reason? And if you don't, is there anything Democrats can do to prevent him from doing so?
Well, there is zero basis for Donald Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act. Zero. It doesn't exist. It's another example of the Trump administration trying to unleash intentionally extremism on American citizens and hardworking American taxpayers. And as Democrats, we're going to continue to stand with Governor J.B. Pritzker in Illinois, stand with them in support of the lawsuit that was filed this morning, and stand with the people of other American cities in defense of their rule of law and the American way of life. Thank you.
How about that Brooklyn smile for the Yankees against the